So you doing the first part, Omar?
Yeah. Okay. Give me 1 second. Let me tweet it out.
Let me tweet out this thing and.
I am ready to go. Oh, actually, I'm not. I don't even have the script up. All right. Hi, phone on silent.
It is on silent. I got a call last time.
Did you?
Yeah. You didn't hear, huh?
Nah.
My God.
Oh,
Okay, I'm ready.
I'm ready to. Go ahead. Hello, South Florida, to another COVID-19 edition of X's and Omar. We have entered the final phase of the second year of the 3-year rebuild for the Miami Dolphins, and it concluded with this team using their 14 draft selections, which they entered the 2020 NFL Draft, and turning it into 11 rookies, 11 draftees, because they've signed 9 more undrafted rookies, and 1 free agent running back. I am Omar Kelly, and the gentleman that you see on the other side of the screen, he is Dave Hyde, Sun Sentinel columnist, and we are here to talk about the bounty of newcomers the Miami Dolphins will have in 2020. The Dolphins filled the draft room with a lot of smoke in terms of a lot of talk about how they like Justin Herbert, how Jordan Love would have been a good secondary pick if they went and selected the offensive lineman. Hey, the Dolphins are trying to move up to get ahead of the Giants to go get an offensive lineman. And a lot of that talk allowed the Dolphins to put themselves in position to select the quarterback who we've been talking about for an entire year, if not more, Alabama's Tua Tagovailoa, and they used 3 of their picks to select 3 offensive linemen, another 3 of their picks to select 3 defensive linemen. Overall, Dave, what did you like and what did you not like about the Dolphins' 2020 NFL Draft?
Well, I love the philosophy of it, okay, the strategy, which was get a quarterback. We knew they needed a quarterback. The whole season was sacrificed for a quarterback. So they got one. Now they're rolling the dice a little on Tua, obviously, because of his injury history, but I get why they're doing that. Then I get why they bolstered the lines up. Get those big uglies in there and start winning the battle on the line, because they've been pushed around for years right now. And, Brian Flores, Chris Greer seem to know we better get some guys in there on the line if we're going to start winning.
Yeah, this to me, I mean, no secret if you've watched X's and Omar, I've been obsessed with Tua Tagovailoa since December of 2019 when I actually started breaking down his college film and realized, hey, this guy has it. He's got the accuracy. He's got the intangibles. Like, there is no flaw in his game. And proof and evidence of there is no flaw in his game is the biggest criticism outside of the medicals that surfaced during the entire draft process was from his head coach, Nick Saban, who said, hey, he needs to stop trying to extend plays too much and learn to throw the ball away. That's the heaviest criticism outside of the medicals, of course. Now, is it a medical risk of taking Tua? Absolutely. Is it a risk I'm willing to take? Certainly, especially if he's one of 3 first-round picks. And I said, with my strategy for this draft is, if you're going to draft Tua, then you build him one of the biggest and strongest and most physical offensive lines in the NFL. And I think that they're well on their way with the selections that they made. Robert Hunt, Solomon Kendall, and then Arthur Jackson.
Austin Jackson.
Austin Jackson, the offensive lineman from USC. I thought that while you can argue about who would have been the better tackle in maybe the first round, or whether or not they should have went another position with their second round pick that they used on Robert Hunt. I personally feel like if you have a plan, you make it and you stick to it, and they clearly want to build the lines.
Well, here's the question I have, Omar, and I agree with the philosophy and everything, but it is going to come down to the individual selections. A year ago, they took Michael Dieter in the third round, and to their credit, in some respects, they're almost, it looks like they're not ready, maybe not give up on him, but they're not guaranteeing him anything after watching him. And so, we sort of pump the brakes a little before saying they built a brick wall for Tua. We need to see these guys come in. I like the idea of going out and getting this line, but we'll see how they play.
Now, what did you not like?
Well, I mean, you're not going to get everything when you need everything, right? They needed everything. Okay, what didn't I like? I think everybody thought they were going to get a running back somewhere on day 2, okay? And they even thought that because otherwise they wouldn't have traded for a 5th round pick for a running back after really the slew of running backs were taken, okay? When they realized they weren't going to get the guy they wanted or one of the guys they wanted in a group of them, then they made the trade for the 5th round pick to San Francisco for a running back. And I get that. So, I mean, but to me, the overriding thing is I love the philosophy. We're going to have quibbles. They didn't get this. They didn't get that.
Well, they had 14 draft picks, so there should have been no excuse about what they didn't deliver. But you could always second guess a draft. We'll know in the end based on how players perform. Our first question comes from Zach. After all the additions, what do you feel is now the team's biggest liability in regards to talent and depth?
Well, when you look at what they have and where they're going, they're banking everything on youth. So let's assume they hit on these draft picks. So where are they on depth? To me, it's again the pass rush still. Their defensive ends, are they proven pass rushers? Maybe, we'll see. But they don't have the glaring weakness of a year ago. I still think receiver, they could have bolstered that up some. But there's not the glaring weakness that you said a year ago. It was across the roster.
Yeah, to me, one of the biggest issues that remains is tight end. I felt like they could have used an inline blocker to compete with Durham Schmeidt and Michael Roberts for that spot next to Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki, we know that he's a productive pass catcher, but we know he's struggled on the line. Now, if he fixes that problem and can be an inline tight end, then problem solved. Also in the secondary, Bobby McCain and Eric Rowe. Let's keep this in mind. These are 2 cornerbacks that have been converted to safety. That doesn't mean they're natural safeties, doesn't mean they're good safeties. And Rashad Jones, the loss of him, don't forget, you could say whatever you want about Rashad Jones, but he was good for about 5 impact plays per season, interceptions, forced fumbles, touchdowns, and you're not going to get that back based on what I'm seeing right now, at least not from the safeties.
But I will say about the safeties, and the game shifted in that a lot of cornerbacks are moving to safety. And so I think they're just following what the game's allowing them to do. That the game's outlawed big hits by safeties, and you want safeties now that can cover, man to man, and they got guys who can do that. So would I prefer Bobby McCain in the slot? Probably, because he excelled there. Does that mean Eric Rowe shouldn't go to safety from cornerback? Probably not, because again, that's where the game's going. But I see what you're saying. Let's go to the next question. Rich Kaufman asks, do you think Miami has finally solidified the interior offensive line? Finally, let's underline that idea. Between the free agents and draftees, they have put a considerable amount of resources into fixing this unit the offseason, unlike last season.
I applaud them. You know how I feel about the big uglies in the trench play, Dave. The signing of Eric Flowers, I thought he was a very slept-on free agent. Obviously, he wasn't that slept-on considering he got $10 million. Ted Karras, I was a fan of his work, especially late in the season when he got experience at center and got his feet wet and had a little bit of understanding. And then Robert Hunt and Solomon Kinley, they are both reputable, mauling, bruising guys who just drive running games. If you have two guards who are driving running games and pushing the defensive tackle into 3 yards into the backfield, clearing out holes, that's going to help any offense, any quarterback, and any defense. So I like those 3 selections. I, in fact, think Robert Hunt might even be tried at tackle, and maybe you push Jesse Davis in at guard. You got options, and more importantly, you got depth. I've said this for so many years. One, the 2 seasons that this Dolphins team actually made it to the playoffs, 2008 and 2016. Those were years where they had good, respectable, reliable offensive lines, even offensive lines that survived injuries. And when you look at what this team has struggled with over the years, it's always been a struggle at the offensive line, and usually because they don't have depth. And when they've got to move on to the Dallas Thomases of the world as starters, this team struggles, or they have to rely on Sam Young, to make it through 5 games. This team struggles. Right now, you've got so much versatility because everybody plays more than one position.
Yeah, I think we saw a whole sea change in philosophy in certainly the last 2 years. Definitely this year, it really exposed because of the number of draft picks. In the 10 years before Flores arrived, the Dolphins draft 20 linemen, offensive and defensive, of 79 picks. In the last 2 years, they've drafted 9. So in 2 years, they've almost done half of what they did in 10 years on linemen. And you want to get to the shortcut of why they've been pushed around on Sundays. There it is. They just haven't invested enough in the lines, and now they have, and now we'll see how they develop. Did they get the right guys? All that stuff. But the philosophy behind it makes sense.
William Washington has our next question. What will the offensive identity of this team be, Dave?
That's a great question, considering there's so many moving parts. What we know from their draft is they have gone back to drafting big, strong linemen. Like, you have to go back to the Parcells era when they did that. Okay, they got away from it with the Joe Philbin and Adam Gase. They didn't. There's more on mobility and all that. So
Gase
now
thought
we're
he could
back.
go find a guard at Publix.
Yeah, now we're back to getting the big, strong, 330 X pounds lineman weighing on you over the course of a game. So I think it looks like we're going to a power game more.
Yeah, I piggyback on that. I think the power game, especially with Jordan Howard and his running style, and Matt Breida, his running style. I mean, Jordan Howard nearly ran for 1,000 yards. I mean, he did run for 1,000 yards in his first 3 seasons. Breida has averaged 5 yards per carry his entire NFL career. He's a 3-year vet, based on what I'm told. His issue is really he struggled to stay healthy, but if he's in a platoon system and he's sharing the backfield, I think that he'll be able to manage that workload. It'll be interesting to see. Brian Flores, at the beginning, when he joined the Dolphins, he said he wanted a physical power rushing attack. Unfortunately, they didn't have the weaponry or the talent to do that. They averaged fewest rushing yards in franchise history, the worst in the NFL, and I think it handcuffed the offense and probably was the reason that the offensive coordinator got fired. Now we're going to see he's reiterating, hey, I want a powerful physical rushing attack that can wear down defenses.
Yeah, and look, when Ryan Fitzpatrick is your leading rusher, that's not a good thing, okay? So the next question, Karen wants to know, which Dolphins pick do you think is quite underrated, Omar?
Oh, it's got to be Raekwon Davis, the Alabama defensive tackle. I think you're talking about 6'4", 330 pounds, 7'1" wingspan. I mean, his arms go on forever. Now, I remember watching University of Alabama back in 2000, I believe it was 17, and I was watching they had 3 defensive linemen, including Quentin Williams, who were selected high in the draft. And I was evaluating them, because back then the Dolphins needed defensive line help. But I couldn't help but watch this young sophomore who's just destroying people and tearing up the field. He finished the game with finished the season with 85 tackles and 8.5 sacks. And I just knew this guy's going to be a top 10 pick. Well, he tailed off and there's questions about his work ethic and his drive and his motor, which reminds a lot of people of a certain defensive lineman named Jordan Phillips, who I don't like to say his name because he shows up like the boogeyman in my timeline. And that makes me a little bit nervous. Guys with the ability that you have to light a fire under. Now, the question is, how are they going to utilize him? And Brian Flores said something to me that really turned the light bulb on in my brain. It's not always about stats with those defensive linemen. And if you look at Vince Wilfork's career, you know how the Patriots use Vince Wilfork? They put him in whatever the gap of the opponent's favorite running gap is. He just spent all game in that gap, just wreaking havoc, couldn't be moved, and the opponent had to go elsewhere. I think you can do that with Raekwon Davis. I don't think he's a nose tackle like a lot of people think he's a nose tackle. I see him as a run-stopping 3-4 defensive end who you put him at whatever side or whatever gap the opponent likes to run to. They've got to occupy two on him, and he can just clog that lane.
All right, I'm going to go with the edge rusher, Curtis Weaver. He went late in the draft, and there were a lot of projections he was going to go early, like first day, second day. And you could tell when we talked to him, he was angry. He was very angry of the position he was taken in the draft. And sometimes guys come on with a chip on their shoulder. For whatever reason, they drop. And yet, let's see if he can live up to some of the early projections there.
Conditioning, body was why he dropped.
Yeah.
It just wasn't a pretty. He doesn't have a pretty body, apparently.
We've seen this before, though. Guys come who have great production in college. He led this conference in sacks. Come in and with some anger to them to the game, and we'll see how it translates. I'm curious to see how this works with him. All right, Omar. The Dolphins did what this franchise hasn't done since 2012, selecting a quarterback. Thank God, in the first round by taking Alabama standout Tua Tagovailoa. But he's 5 months into rehabbing a dislocated hip. Tua's running and throwing the football, but he's not all the way healed yet. And this is a type of injury that takes some time. Brian Flores has publicly stated the Dolphins are Ryan Fitzpatrick's team, and that's fair praise for the 15-year veteran who led Miami to 5 wins last season, led the team in rushing, and was the team's MVP. But Fitzpatrick is 55, 83-1 as a starter, and that indicates the 37-year-old will only take the Dolphins so far. What should Dolphins fans expect from Tagovailoa this season, and when in the starting lineup?
I'm going to begin this portion by bringing up Patrick Mahomes. Now, people who were involved with the Kansas City Chiefs and watched those practices, they'll tell you that Patrick Mahomes was balling his rookie year in practice. We only saw him, I believe, 2 games at the end of the season. And the reason why we saw him was because they wanted to take a look at him at the end of the year. And I could see sort of the similar thing happening for Tua Tagovailoa. One, he needs to have the hip healed. 2, you don't really want to put him out on the field and risk suffering a setback or risk suffering an injury. And 3, they really don't have that much of a need for a playmaker. It's ideal for them to watch, for him to sit, watch, and learn, and be slow cooked like a lot of the good quarterbacks have in the past few decades. Brett Favre watched and learned. Steve Young watched and learned. Phillip Rivers watched and learned. There is no harm in having a young quarterback watch and learn.
Well, to me, okay, Phillip Rivers played behind Drew Brees in San Diego. Steve Young played behind Joe Montana. The question becomes, to me, Ryan Fitzpatrick, as much as Tua's health and rehabilitation. Okay, where's his hip at this year? But I think, especially if the season gets pushed back, it's going to be a competitive situation. And how does Ryan Fitzpatrick play this year? You saw the best of him last year, the best in his career. Okay, is that who he is now? or does he revert in some form, either injury, age, or just 15 years of, let's face it, being mediocre at best? Does he revert back to that? So I think some of this has to do with who Ryan Fitzpatrick is, and in that situation, I'll compare it to Lamar Jackson at Baltimore. Joe Flacco was fading in his career, and by midseason, it was obvious in practice Lamar Jackson was playing better than Joe Flacco. And if that becomes a situation, then I think we'll see Tua sooner rather than later, assuming, of course, his health and his hip and all that is to where the Dolphins
Do you
want.
trust it? Do you risk him possibly suffering a setback?
Well, the question becomes, is he healthy? If he's healthy, what's the difference in now or next year? Okay, if the doctors say he's a go, then he can go out there. The perfect situation, of course, would be to rest him, this year, have him learn. But that would mean Ryan Fitzpatrick's playing well.
We also got Josh Rosen here.
Josh Rosen. And you know what? Let's not dismiss Josh Rosen and all this. I'm curious to see where he, here again, he was a top 10 drafted player, where he is in year 3, and when he's being, tough love for him last year from Brian Flores, and let's see where he is this year.
Our next question comes from Justin Drunker, who asked, what surprised you the most about Chris Greer's strategy, and what disappointed you the most?
I wasn't surprised at all. As we've said, he needed a quarterback, okay? And I know at the end of last year he was saying, oh, we're not desperate for a quarterback, because that's what GMs say going into a draft or when they're facing. Everybody knew they were desperate for a quarterback. And why were they desperate for a quarterback? Because they passed on quarterbacks for years, which just infuriated me. So finally, I like they took a quarterback. I like they built up the lines. There's nothing from this draft that disappointed me at all. In fact, I sat there when they kept getting guard after guard. I was going, well, I'm clapping. I get it. They've tried it the other way. Let's try it this way.
I have this feeling that in the second day of the draft, and maybe I don't think the second day of the draft turned out the way that they had hoped. And here's my reasoning why. I think they intended to walk out of that draft with the tailback, one of the upper echelon tailbacks, and they left empty-handed. And in fact, my sources told me they called some agents of veteran running backs at that time, out of work veteran running backs, to say, hey, we might be interested in bringing in your client. What's the market? What are the demands? Maybe to try to figure out whether they want to do that or whether they want to trade for Matt Breida. So I'm sorry, but you can't tell me that your plan wasn't to get a DeAndre Swift, who the Lions took one spot ahead of you, or a Jonathan Taylor, or a J.K. Dobbins, or a Cam Akers. Other teams just outmaneuvered you, and that happens in the draft. So that surprised me. I didn't expect them to get outmaneuvered with as much ammunition as they had, but clearly they had a feeling about Robert Hunt because they traded up to go get him. They were aggressive and went and got him. So that's a huge indicator that he is the guy that they wanted. So actually, Solomon Kinley was the guy that they traded up for. So he is the guy that they wanted. It'll be interesting to see what he brings to the table and if he can compete really for a starting guard spot, because right now that guard spot's pretty crowded.
You can find running backs everywhere. Look at that again. We keep
Dave's
repeating.
Annual disrespect of running backs.
Super Bowl annually, they show me why. The Super Bowl starters this year: Damian Williams, who was the Dolphins let him walk away for $1.5 million.
Poor daddy. Damian was a baller. The Dolphins didn't know what they were doing.
Okay, but they let him. You can find him, is my point, Omar. And San Francisco had a guy on its, 6th or 7th team. So, look, yes, running backs matter. Yes, you can find them elsewhere. And, yeah, I get it. They were planning to get a running back on the second day of the draft, and it didn't work out for them. I get that. And you know what? Of all the questions and criticisms of the draft, I'm fine walking out if that's the number one. Okay, our next question comes from that boy Rod 22. Would you play Tua at any point this season, preseason included, or just sit him the entire season?
I don't know how I feel about this, Dave. That's my precious. I don't want to play him in the preseason. I just don't, because I don't want to take the chance of putting him in a position where somebody can hit him and hurt him longer than. Give me 9 months. Give me 9 months of that hip healing.
But if the doctors say he's a go, then you can play him in preseason. You're gonna worry. You know what? You know who he is? He's Giancarlo Stanton. Okay, that's what it's going to be like for the Dolphins for the next 10 years, assuming he lasts that long. Which is every time Giancarlo Stanton would go out for the Marlins, he could hit a home run. He could lead the league in home runs as he did, or he could miss 5 months with an injury as he repeatedly did. So, and that's the scary thing. If you're scared to put him out there at all when the doctors are saying he's ready, then
preseason.
Why draft him? Why draft him if you're that scared?
I drafted him for the next decade. I didn't draft him for 2020. So I'm very cautious with it. My wife works with people rehabbing hips all the time. I've talked to different professional athletes. If you ask a pro athlete who had a hip procedure years after their career, what's bothering you? What's still hurting? They'll tell you it's my hip. Those hip issues don't go away. Look at
Omar, that was the problem. You shouldn't have drafted him. If you fear right now, and I get you have to baby him at the start. I get that till the doctors say he's ready. But if they say he's ready, get him out there.
I'm babying all of 2020. This is a 3-year rebuild, David. I don't need instant Tagovailoa. Are we there? Chris Buston wants to know, are you satisfied with the Dolphins using the 30th pick on Auburn cornerback Noah Igbenogany? We'll figure it out as we go.
Get better, Omar. You're improving there. That's good. That shows that you've been working at it. Yeah, I have no problem with it. Look, and the question, I guess, look, they have the two highest paid cornerbacks in the game already there at that position.
That's correct.
So are they piling on needlessly talent? And my point would be no. Look where the game's gone. You need more cornerbacks. And if they now have 3 highly talented quarterbacks in addition to Goodwin and Bobby McCain and Eric Rowe, who they like now at safety, look, there's nothing wrong with strengthening a strength.
I agree with you. There is nothing wrong with strengthening a strength. However, and I do like Noah Igbenogany. I can't even say it. I like him. He was one of the 10 players on my man crush list in terms of people that I would bang the table for. I projected him in every mock draft I did as a first-round talent, as the 3rd cornerback taken off the board because he's that talented. My problem is, I think that you potentially missed the Pro Bowler in this draft, which is DeAndre Swift. And I would have loved to have paired him with Tua Tagovailoa as my foundation and building blocks of this franchise. Now, next year they can go get a running back or there's still some talented running backs. Devontae Freeman is out there if something happens with your backfield. So I get it. It'll be okay. Do I like the selection of Noah Igbenogany, whatever? Absolutely, I do. But I would have preferred it to have been DeAndre Swift.
Running backs, Omar. Running backs. Okay, Herbert GM76 says, why didn't we trade Josh Rosen during the draft? Are there no suitors, or Miami still need him as a backup to Ryan Fitzpatrick?
There were no suitors last year. The Dolphins were the only team and overpaid for him, giving up a 2nd and a 5th. What are you going to get back? Maybe you get back the 5th. But right now, Josh Rosen is a young, allegedly talented quarterback on a cheap contract. He could serve as the number 2 this year. And hey, in 2021, you're going to need somebody to challenge Tua. And who knows what happens when Josh Rosen, the fire is lit and he could in Chan Gailey's offense, he can take off and become Drew Brees. Drew Brees was thrown away by the Chargers, and for Phillip Rivers, and his career took off. Now, I'm not a huge Josh Rosen fan, but you never know what he's going to be. Would I take a 5th-round pick for him? Absolutely. But I like the fact that he's still here.
Well, you can't have it both ways, Omar. You can't say,
all right, trade
I'm going to sit Tua this year and not have a backup. Josh Rosen has to be the backup this year.
That's
You're
correct.
Going to do that. So to me,
all on board
there's
with that.
great value. They're keeping Josh Rosen, not just to see where he develops. And look, he's still younger than Joe Burrow. Okay, let's not dismiss development in any player, and let's see what happens there. But beyond, he plays a valuable role as possibly the backup this year if the Dolphins decide we're really not going to, Tua's hip isn't ready, or we're not comfortable with putting him out there, and then Josh Rosen's the backup.
Our next question comes from Freddie in Miami, who asks, how well does Matt Breida fit with Jordan Howard? What run schemes best fit their play style? To me, the answer, they're a power running scheme. They're a power rushing team. I think you're going to see very little pulling from these guards. You didn't see much of it last year. And I definitely believe that they pair well together. Breida has caught passes efficiently. I think Jordan Howard is a pass catcher. I think his situation in Chicago, they drafted a pass catching back, so they had to put him onto the field when Jordan Howard was, in his final years there. I don't see any reason why these two can't work well together in the Miami offense. I don't see any reason why they can't help the Dolphins run for 1,700 yards.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, Breida averaged 5 yards a carry the last 2 years in San Francisco. He's averaged, I believe it was 8.2 yards a catch the last 2 years. Now, he's not caught a lot, so they don't have like a James White, okay, who is a proven pass-catching commodity. But certainly both have shown they can catch passes. So it's a good tandem. It's not a perfect tandem as far as one's a great third down back and one's a first and second down back. I think they as you said, they both can run with power, and they both have shown some pass catching, but that's not their forte.
Question 10 comes from Fanny Pise, who asks, does the acquisition of Matt Breida and Malcolm Perry, the running back, quarterback, wide receiver from Navy, mean Kalen Ballage, Chandler Cox, and Patrick Laird are in trouble?
Well, coming out of last year, you knew they were in trouble, right? I mean,
a quarterback can't lead the team in rushing without you being in trouble.
You didn't need this draft to say they're looking to replace their running backs. Okay, now we'll see with Chandler Cox, the fullback, what happens with him and Chan Gailey's offense. Do they want a fullback and all that? But
linebacker Eldon Roberts plays fullback.
They replace running backs, and they've done that.
Yeah, linebacker Eldon Roberts played fullback for the Patriots, so I don't even think Chandler Cox is safe. To me, Ballage is a player that the coaches were high on last year, which is why he kept getting opportunity after opportunity with 1.9 yards per carry. I will acknowledge that he practiced quite well. It just didn't materialize when it came to game time. He couldn't find running lanes, and it's not because the offensive line weren't blocking it. We'll see the improvement that he's made. I remember Frank Gore is very high on him. A lot of people that I respect have a high opinion of Kalen Ballage, so we'll see where that plays out. But Malcolm Perry, I did want to address Malcolm Perry's selection. This is a young player who is very talented, very dynamic, very small. So unless he comes out on the practice field and in preseason and is absolutely tearing it up, I think this is a guy that you try to stash on your practice squad and try to develop in and see what he can be, because in the ideal world, maybe he's your slot receiver.
That'd be the perfect spot for him, wouldn't it? I mean, slot and return man. Yeah. I mean, Bill Belichick's made a career of finding guys late in drafts who fill those roles. And
Yeah.
and that'd be perfect for Malcolm Perry. He's proven he can. He's in college at Navy that he's a game changing talent. Now how it translates into the NFL and all that remains to be seen. But slot receiver would be perfect fit for him.
The problem that I have with him being projected as a running back is he probably doesn't know how to pass block. And to me, you can't get in that backfield, especially on third downs, until you know how to pass block. So, and maybe size-wise, I'm not sure that he'll be able to pass block. That's like putting Jakeem Grant back there to pass block. Like, it's not going to end up good for you. Well, Dave, it's important to keep a close eye on your competition in the division. And Miami's AFC rivals, hate to say it if you're Dolphins fans, but they had some pretty good drafts. Buffalo Bills, not only did they acquire Stephon Diggs from Minnesota's first-round pick, but they also picked up A.J. Epinesa, Utah tailback Zach Moss, UFC receiver Gabriel Davis, a lot of talented players. And Jake Fromm, two contrasting style quarterbacks in terms of what Buffalo's got. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I'm not saying he's going to push what's that quarterback name? The inaccurate one. Josh Allen. I'm not saying he's going to push Josh Allen, but it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And then the Jets, man, oh man, somebody must have muzzled Adam Gase because the Jets doubled down, built their trenches. Mekhi Becton. They drafted Cameron Clark, two guys who I think are going to start right away. Talented playmakers in Denzel Mims, California safety Ashton Davis, and then Jabari Zuniga, who was one of my man crush guys. I think the Jets had a top 3 draft. So looks the future could be bright for them, but now let's get to the Patriots. No quarterback, no receiver. They drafted a couple of linebackers and a couple pass rushers and Bill Belichick's scheme fit guys. But what's Bill doing, Dave?
Well, we're good. Look, remember there's a story when Tom Brady got hurt in 2008, first game of the year, he tore his ACL. He's out for the year, and Matt Castle is now the quarterback, right?
USC backup.
Check had Monday workouts to work out a couple quarterbacks. Okay, a common thing in the league. Okay, so but once Brady got hurt, he canceled those Monday workouts. Why? Because he wanted to tell everybody inside the team. He didn't want a couple quarterbacks walking around working out, and he wanted the team to realize Matt Castle's our guy. And I think that's his statement from this draft about Jarrett Stidham. Jarrett Stidham is his guy. He didn't go out and
could have tried to turn it up.
Get somebody else. So we'll see. Let's face it. He's the greatest coach. Now, can he do it twice? Can he get Tom Brady as a latter round pick and now get another one and make both of them into franchise quarterbacks? I'm fascinated to see what's going to play out there.
I think this whole season for the Patriots is about proving that they can do it without Tom Brady. Can you imagine the Patriots winning the AFC East without Tom Brady with this roster?
Imagine it. Yes, I can imagine it.
Yeah, right? It'll be crazy, but it can be imagined. Yes. Carol City 86 wants to know, drafted players only, what 3 players do you see making an immediate impact and an upgrade at their position?
Well, I mean, we're gonna put Tua on ice. Okay, we're gonna put him aside for this year since we're talking immediate. But to me, let's just go pick 3 offensive linemen and away we go. Okay, and they better make immediate and big impact on this offensive line. You want three of these guys to get in there and have starting jobs, because let's face it, other than there's one guy coming out of last year where you said, okay, that's a guy we can work with. They need 4 new starters, and it seems like Karras is being handed the center job, doesn't it, Omar?
Yeah, I think Michael Dieter, I'm curious to see if Michael Dieter's going to be taking snaps and get a chance to push, because remember, Ted Karras only signed a 1-year deal for $4 million.
Yeah.
So
Okay, that's a good point. Right.
So, and to me, the guys that probably have to make an immediate impact. Solomon Kinley. They traded up for him. They gave up 2 fourth-round picks to move up because clearly that's the guy that they wanted. And you saw Brian Flores like blocking in the video ESPN showed. He was all excited. That was probably the pick he was probably the most excited about. To me, Raekwon Davis is a guy, man, when you just look at him, he looks like what a football player is supposed to look like. It just big, towering, long arms, physical, fit. This isn't a saggy body. This is a guy that I think that you could put at defensive end, put on the same line with Godchild and Christian Wilkins, and that can be a man-eating line. That I'm not talking about a guy rotating in. I'm talking about all three of them on the field together. So I like that, and I also like Jared Strobridge. Not the player, but his opportunity. He's just going to have to compete with Avery Moss and Zach Seiler for that starting defensive end spot if they don't play Raekwon Davis there.
And yet there's only one rookie we're assured completely 100% is going to be starting the first game, and that is Blake Ferguson, the long snapper. Because immediately after they drafted him, the Dolphins long snapper was released. And so there you go. That told me the Dolphins have a lot of draft picks when they're drafting a long snapper.
I hated that pick, Dave. I hated that pick. Here's the reason I hated that pick. One, SMU receiver James Prochet, who is one of my favorite players in this draft, was still sitting there in the 6th round. I thought that would have been a great pickup for the Dolphins. And then, okay, Ferguson, you could have guaranteed him his whole rookie contract if he was an undrafted player, and he would have been signed. It's not like another team drafted a long snapper.
Well, they must have had word that thought that somebody else was going to draft him, right? I mean, that's the bottom line there.
I guess so. I'm not happy.
Okay. All right, Nathan Stokes with the question now. Were you surprised Miami didn't look to go for an elite college wide receiver? They had plenty of picks and options were there.
You know, over the course of my career, I've learned receiver is the hardest position for a young player to contribute right away because there's so much they got to learn, so many different jobs. And so I understood it. They like their receiving core. I've said this since they ended the season. Devontae Parker, 1,000-yard receiver. Preston Williams would have been a 1,000-yard receiver if he hadn't gotten hurt. Are you concerned about him coming back? Absolutely. Albert Wilson, we all remember what he did in 2018 when he was fully healthy. Now he's going to have a year to rehab. Hell, the Dolphins are curious because they haven't waived him despite his $9.5 million salary. I think Allen Hurns is a very productive, proven NFL receiver. That's 4 right there. And we didn't even get into the leftovers or of what else. I looked at this roster, and there are 10 receivers on the Dolphins training camp roster who will probably be playing on an NFL team's 53-man roster in September and October. So I didn't see the need for them to draft a receiver.
You know what? I think it also flows into this philosophy. You know, there's a scouting report that Bill Belichick wrote for his assistants going back in the early 90s, floating out there on the internet. It was put out there by Daniel Jeremiah of NFL.com. And his major tenet, build the middle of the field. Build, you know, right up the middle. Just like in baseball, catcher, you know, shortstop, second baseman, center field, same idea. And don't worry so much about the outer. And you look at his draft history, he rarely drafts a receiver at high.
Did one last year, and that guy barely even contributed.
And he did a couple years earlier, Philip Dorsett, and that didn't work out.
No, he traded for Dorsett.
Great. Excuse me, traded for Dorsett. You know, I think there's some of that. The Dolphins realize they need to, you know, teams are going to run up the middle on them unless they try to do something. So they got Raekwon Davis, hopefully, to stop that. And in addition to free agency, they loaded up on the defense. And now you look at their draft this time, especially not especially, but they got the interior of the line. If it's not solved now, it never will be because they threw so many draft picks, so much money at it, that if they don't get 2 standout guards out of this, then I'm done.
Hey, to quote Joe Philbin, I'm a little queasy about tackle right now. God, the interior is good, but tackle's a little bit, I'm a Jesse Davis.
They put an 18th pick, Austin Jackson, on the tackle. They have Jesse Davis and or Robert Hunt at tackle. So
Julian Davenport,
the veterans they got coming back. So I mean, they should be okay, right?
Still make me a little queasy, Dave. Got my stomach a little bit upset. Chris has our next question. Do you see Bobby McCain having a starting role on the defense now, or do you think that he'll fall to primarily being a second-string special teams guy?
I'm curious to see where this goes. Bobby McCain was a standout slot receiver. Okay, that's what he got. He got a nice contract because that's a huge role on a defense. Now, Brian Flores comes in, immediately moves him to safety. He gets hurt. He's an undersized safety. Even in today's game where, again, cornerbacks are going to safety, you have to have some size there.
He was an undersized cornerback, and now he's an undersized safety.
Yeah, so, look, there's a role for Bobby McCain on this defense. The question is, with them drafting another cornerback in the first round, you'd think that's where Noah would go to the slot receiver, if you're projecting where a talented rookie is going to play. So there's a role for Bobby McCain. He's good enough. The question is, okay, how are they going to use him?
Listen, here, let me explain to fans why Bobby McCain was moved to safety. Because he's the smartest player in that defense, and he's the guy who sews it all together. He makes it all come together. Now, does he need the physicality and two good shoulders to be a good tackler? Absolutely. But he's directing traffic back there like the quarterback. And so I think that there's going to be a very valuable role for him unless Eric Rowe can just replace him and take that quarterback of the defense kind of role. I like Brandon Jones, the safety that they took from Texas in, I believe it was the third round. I think he's a talented player. He's shown the world or told the world that he's a pretty smart player, studying every NFL team's schemes and being able to break it down for him at the combine. My issue with safeties is it's hard for people to play early at that position unless they've got elite traits because there's so much to learn and so much to do. That's part of the reason why Bobby McCain is back there. And I think he's going to continue to be the free safety for the Dolphins.
All right, Omar. The final question comes from Ryan Deal. What draft pick has the best opportunity to start and contribute right away?
For me, I go back to Raekwon Davis. I mean, I told you about when I was watching film of his sophomore season, looking at Quentin Williams and Dalvin Tomlinson and Deshaun Hand, and I was watching for them, but my eyes kept creeping over to Raekwon Davis, and I was like, Jesus, man, this guy's a monster. I mean, he is a guy that you gotta double block, and he opens up everything for everybody else in that season. Then all the attention went to him, and he was giving all those double teams, and he had some quiet seasons for 2 years. It'll be interesting to see if he's motivated, if he's hungry. Players always get hungry when money's on the table, so we know he's going to have a Jordan Phillips-esque season in about 3 years. The question is he going to get off to that kind of start? If he plays well in what I envision for him, he can be a $12 to $15 million a year type of player.
Yeah, my answer would be let's not overthink this. Left tackle is open. Julian Davenport's coming back, but he hasn't really shown a whole lot.
Dave's saying it's open.
And you drafted a guy 18th, and Austin Jackson, big guy, young guy, and yes, he sounds like he's a little rawer and needs some more development and all that. But you drafted him for a reason. Position's open. And I go back to, look, when the Dolphins drafted Richmond Webb, 9th pick overall, Dan Marino, after a preseason game in Chicago, went over to Richard Dent, the Chicago Bears great defensive end, after the game, and he said, how's this guy looking? How's the rookie looking? Meaning Richmond Webb. And Richard Dent said he's going to be fine. That's what you want to hear in preseason. Play them all preseason. See if Austin Jackson's ready, but you drafted him 18th for a reason, and he better be good enough to get out there.
So I gave my grades for the Dolphins draft in my breakdown for the Sun Sentinel. I gave the Dolphins an A. Only reason I took points off and didn't give them an A plus because they didn't get the running back that I wanted, and I felt like the end of the draft they kind of just threw some picks away. Long snapper, come on, really? Now I know guys got to make the 53-man roster, so a long snapper is definitely going to make it. But what would Dave Hyde's grade of the Dolphins 2020 draft be?
2020. You don't ascribe to the theory that you really can't grade drafts for 3 years. In which case, we're grading the 2017 draft. How's
If you want to grade
looking right
2017
now?
draft, we can.
How's that looking good about right now, Omar?
I don't know. I can't even remember. Which one was that? Was that Charles Harris year?
Charles Harris draft.
Oh,
So we came out of that draft saying, hey, they got a pass rusher. They got a pass rusher. Good move. Well, they got the wrong one because Charles Harris went 22nd, and the younger Watt brother went 30th to Pittsburgh, and he's a great player. And Charles Harris is, by the end of his third year, he was inactive. So coming out of the draft, they got everything that I would have hoped and wanted and expected them to get as far as, again, a quarterback, and they built up the lines. And so philosophically, I love what they did. We need to come back in a couple years and see how these guys play.
well, that's it for the draft wrap-up of X's and Omar. Hopefully, we will have a situation where we can wrap up some OTAs and mini camps and training camps. Everybody out there, stay safe. Continue to support the Sun Sentinel because we certainly need it. And we'll see you later. Damn, did an hour.
Yeah, we did an hour. Wow.
Maybe 55.